Dr. Salm asked me to talk to you a little bit about NRMP policy and the big do's and don'ts. So there's going to be a lot of words here on some of these slides. I did that specifically for a reason, so that she can put these in your SharePoint. You guys can have access to them. I'll try to give you illustrations and talk through some examples. Really important. So do's and don'ts. I don't have any financial conflicts. For those of you who don't know me, I am the campus dean for our Cherokee Nation campus. In my previous life, I was an EIO. I've been an internal medicine program director. So I have lived your day-to-day life. Other important things, I am on the ACGB board of directors. I am also on the NRMP board of directors. I am currently the chair-elect of the NRMP board. Important disclaimer, anything I say here is from my professional and personal experience. I am not speaking on behalf of any boards. I want to make sure everybody knows that. We're going to talk about the main residency match calendar overview, match policies, and support resources for you all. Really important to start with NRMP versus ERAS. A lot of times the match is used as a big blanket term to cover everything that happens in the residency application process up through the NRMP algorithm and the transition from UME to a GME environment. NRMP governs the algorithm. Now, we go through some of the policies of what's involved in that, but when students are filling out applications, you all are looking at applications in the program director workstation. That is ERAS. That is a proprietary product of AANC. So they American Academy of Medical Centers. So that is essentially who governs LCMS, which is liaison, which is the MD school accreditation. So just so you kind of know where that bucket is. So one of the things that's happened recently that I'm sure you all have heard about is the OB program have announced, all the OB program directors have announced that they are not going to use ERAS starting with next year's application cycle, that they're going to use an independent product put out by Liaison, which is another organization that is out there. No one knows what that means. Everybody's somewhat scrambling. It could throw this whole process into things. Where it matters is a lot of students, if you look at the students who apply to OB, actually about 60% of them dual apply. So they apply OB in family medicine or OB in general surgery. What does it mean for those students? Those students are going to have to complete applications in the ERAS system and complete an application in the OB application portal that's through Liaison to be able to dual apply to the program. So nobody knows what that means. People are really concerned that this is going to be a kind of fracturing of the application process, and we're going to end up how back in the old days, how probably a lot of us applied to residency, where you submitted applications, ours were actually like handwritten or typed, but that there's not going to be a centralized application pool. So we'll just have to kind of watch what happens there. So the match calendar, to just give you an idea, and I'm sure you guys know that extremely well, September 15th is registration opens for the main residency match. September 27th, you can start seeing applications and MSCPs are available within the ERAS system. The schools right now are busy getting all this information put in. January 31st is the last day for quota changes, withdrawal, and so participation. So you really have to have everything done by that date. February 1st, you can start putting your rank list in, so your rank order list. February 28th, you have to certify. March 11th is match week. So that is where you will find out that if you have any open spots, SOAP will begin on that day. March 14th is SOAP. So similar to last year, all 4 rounds of SOAP will happen on the Thursday of that week again. The feedback nationally on that is that people liked it. At first it kind of felt scary and compressed, but people actually liked having time to look at applicants and actually go through a process. Also was received well on the side of applicants because it gave them a chance to warn. Rip the Band-Aid out, figure out what they were going to do, and actually make better decisions and choices, not feeling that they had to immediately turn around. And then match day is Friday, March 15th. And they do this, I swear, to disrupt everybody's spring break. I really think that this is a purposeful act to destroy spring break for all of us forever. So match participation agreements. So really important. This is the rules that govern the match process. There are different match participation agreements for students, for programs, for medical schools and institutions. So for you all, you have your program match participation agreement. There's also an institutional match participation agreement that Dr. Tom is responsible. So all the programs that come up through our institution are governed by that. Important notices are always highlighted in the match participation agreement. So really, you need to read it on an annual basis. It does get updated and changed. And whenever you actually register for the match, one of the last boxes that you click says, I agree to abide by the match participation agreement. So you actually affirm that you're participating. I did put the sources on here if you want to go to the website so you can actually look at the documents directly. There's a whole bunch of sections on here. Don't get stressed. I'm going to bring out some of the ones that are highlighted. There's a lot that's involved in this, and I didn't even get through all 20. You've got 15 through 20 really get into the legal aspects of it, but most of the policies are up here. So roles and responsibilities, your institutional official provides oversight for all programs in the match. Normally, this is your DIO. The reason that you need to know who you're the institutional official, right? The reason you need to know that Dr. Tom is your institutional official is when you go in and register for the match and put your information into that, she actually has to approve it. So if for some reason you change your quota, you change the number of positions that are going to be in the match, and you don't let her know, hey, we made a change, and she doesn't approve that, those changes don't go into effect. So really important from a process standpoint. She can designate an institutional administrator that can help with that. And then we'll talk about the role of program directors and coordinators. So program directors, you have a lot of responsibility when it comes to the match. Really, you are responsible for what happens. So really, really important. You've got to make sure that your program is there. You have to make sure that your quota is correct. You need to make sure and designate if you're going to participate in SOAP or not. So say you lead never SOAP, we're not going to participate, so I don't want to click that box. And then you get that report on Monday of match week and you didn't fill your program, you cannot talk to a single person until SOAP is over. So I would encourage you to participate in SOAP. You may have never participated in SOAP, it's never happened to you, but you have to understand that by not participating in SOAP, you have excluded yourself completely from that process until SOAP is over. It's not really necessarily a good place to be. Other things that are pretty important that are in here is program information. There is it's something in the match participation agreement that says program information is correct and current and publicly available. So that it falls under the program director's responsibility. So I get that the coordinators a lot of times are updating things, they're updating your website and things along those lines. But you as a program director actually agree that you're responsible for making sure that information is accurate. So this is one that I think catches people off guard. So applicant match history. So before you ever invite someone for an interview, you've got all of your thousands of applications you're going through. You actually need to affirmatively go into the R3 system and look and make sure that that person is not a match violator and that they're actually eligible to participate in the match. Because if they can't participate in the match, they can't match into your program, you're interviewing an ineligible candidate. That gets back to that transparency piece. This does not happen a lot, but it is really important to know that it's there. If you see that little red flag next to someone's name, that means that they have violated some rule of the match. Now, where this gets into issues is most of our applicants are sponsored applicants, meaning you're not going to find them in the R3 system of having participated previously because they're graduating seniors, either a DO or an MD. So you don't have to worry about it. Where you run into that is people who have gone through the match previously who are now, maybe they weren't successful in that process. So they're prior graduates who are now coming back into the process. It does happen. Happens a lot for fellowship programs. So really, this is probably most important for those of you who are running fellowship programs to make sure that they did have previous violations. The other thing that's really, really important to kind of know is all in. So this was kind of a big change as we went from the previous AOA accredited programs, MD accredited programs, everybody came together. There was a lot of things around this. So the all-in policy says if you are as a program register for the match. You have to put every position that you intend to fill for that academic year into the match. This didn't always happen, and I will tell you, I personally benefited from the prior way that this was done. So when I graduated medical school at OSU, I went and did my internship in Philadelphia, decided I wanted to do internal medicine, interviewed for internal medicine residency programs in Boston. I signed a contract outside of the match. They pulled the position out of the match to give it to me because I was a DO candidate, and the rest of the positions then went into the match. That used to happen fairly commonly. It was something that happened. It is an absolute no-no. If they find out that you offer any position outside of the match, it is a violation of the match agreement. You can get kicked out of the match. So really important. This doesn't include PGY2 or higher positions. So that's the other thing. So if you've got an open PGY2 position in your program, PGY3 position for whatever reason, and you're looking at someone transferring into your program, those are not governed by this rule. This is really for those first initial positions, whether it's a PGY1 position or it's a first year fellowship position. Match policy. So duty to act in an ethical and professional manner. All match participants, this includes you as programs, are required to be ethical, essentially. So that means we can't lie, we can't misrepresent information. This governs the application process. So once you register with a match, you are held to the ethical obligations of the match. So it governs application, interview, matching process, and through day 45 of the residency program. So 45 days after the start date. So most of our start dates are July 1st is our official first day of work. To give you an idea, that means August 14th. So the match participation agreement governs that entire time period. Really important to keep in mind. The other thing is if for some reason you go into a waiver process, a violation investigation, any of that, you're still held to the ethical policy. So if you submit on day 44 of an intern's request for something that's happened, that you're going to extend governance of the match process until that whatever that complaint violation resolves. So interview period, really important. Where is the ethical issues around the interview period? It's just really around making sure that you have equitable practices, reflect the mutual respect for the needs of the applicant in the program. We eliminate reasons for undue influence. So big thing, and this went in 2 years ago, and people act like they were totally shocked this year. So we've gotten lots of feedback around this. You can't offer more interview positions than you intend to actually interview. So what was happening, and this happened kind of commonly in COVID when we first shifted to video interviews, if I'm going to interview, I'm going to have 10 interviews, but I'm going to send out 100 invitations for interviews, and the first 10 people that get back to me is to schedule and have those 10 interviews. Well, so what were the students doing? They were totally ignoring their clinical rotations on their phone, waiting for that email that they might get an interview offer, because they know if they happened to be, in the OR and they missed that, then they wouldn't get the interview because they sent out, they missed that opportunity. So these poor kids were completely on edge because they didn't want to miss that opportunity. So what the ethical standards say is, if you intend to do 10 interviews, send out 10 interview offers. If 5 of those people decline the interview offer, send out 5 more offers for those number of spots. The other thing is that you have to give them a reasonable time to respond. So what is listed as a reasonable time is 48 hours, essentially 2 business days. So, don't send, people are sending out offers like at 2 o'clock in the morning. And then they would be gone by 2:02 a.m. So really crazy kind of wonky things were happening in COVID. I think everybody was just stressed and they were trying to do work when they could, and I don't think it was a purposeful thing, but it wasn't good. So the other thing is, if you have to cancel interviews, try to give the students notice. They've invested a lot of money, especially for in-person interviews to come. The other thing that was happening fairly commonly is it would be, 6 hours before an interview or the day before, and students were being notified that their interviews had been canceled. So a lot of money invested in that. Same things in the students think. If a student calls you and cancels an interview, they should give you reasonable notice. Now, this doesn't mean, when I was a DIO, I had a program director actually go to labor on a day that they were supposed to be doing applicant interviews. We scrambled, we figured it out, but it was somewhat disruptive. You know, things happen, someone may not make an interview. The program director obviously didn't participate. We shifted that to the associate program directors. So things happen, and that's not going to be considered a match violation. But we don't want to purposely have students spending money to come and interview with your programs and learn about your programs and for that reason. So completeness, timeliness, and accuracy of information. What this really is getting to is the students need to know what your contract says and what your institutional policies are. And I cannot emphasize this enough. If you have pre-employment fees, if you're going to require training licenses for your applicants to be able to start, if you sponsor visas or don't sponsor visas, drug screens are a huge thing. If medicinal marijuana is going to flag on your drug screen no matter what, and that is an ineligibility for employment at your institution, all of that needs to be disclosed ahead of time. Why that matters is when that student, your new employee, fails their drug screen because they use medicinal marijuana, that is against your institutional policy, and you didn't disclose it, and you don't have documentation that you disclosed it, that is not reason for a waiver. If you tell them you cannot work here and they fail the drug screen, that is a reason for a waiver. You don't have to take that person and violate their hospital policy. So you want to make sure that you are disclosing that they have all that information. No one cares if you decide suddenly to pay the residents more money, right? So nobody cares about those financial type things. What they care about is really those policies. And where I will tell you, I have seen issues is really around pre-employment type things, drug screens and visas. So if you do not sponsor visas, you should not be interviewing people who have to have a visa to participate in your program. Basically same thing. This is on the applicant side though, so I do think that it's important. Applicants are responsible for telling you the truth. So if an applicant were to tell you, yes, I'm 100% going to graduate on time, but they had a 6-month leave of absence for whatever reason, and that somehow made it through the process. The school didn't flag it, they didn't disclose that to you. They're going to finish off cycles. Maybe it's not 6 months. Maybe it means that they don't graduate until August 1st to be able to start your program. That is 100% considered a violation of ethics, and that would be a reason to be granted a waiver. You wouldn't have to take that person even if they matched. So if you discover that afterwards. Another example of that. If you are a fellowship program director and you find out that a resident applied to your fellowship, matched into your program, and was under an OIG investigation for Medicare fraud, and they failed to disclose that, you would be able to not take them into your program. That would be a reason for a waiver because of that failure to disclose. Pitfalls by programs. So those of you that know me, I love Stranger Things, so you're welcome. All of your characters are Stranger Things characters. So failure to provide a complete timely, Maury Bowman is a match applicant. He learned after match day that a psychology program where he matched doesn't accept residence visas. He had a J1 visa. It was on his ERAF application. Issue, programs are required to share eligibility requirements. He should have known that he wasn't going to be taken. He should have never been interviewed. Shouldn't have happened. Best practice, post all your eligibility requirements and policies to your program's website. Actually get a written confirmation from the interview that they have seen the policies and that they've been shared with them. It's an easy thing you can do as part of your interview process so that it protects you as a program to make sure that they know that you share that information. Programs have to also notify match applicants in the NRMP and anything that delays. So a lot of times it is not uncommon programs will get a call and say, you know, this happened, I'm not gonna be able to start for 2 days, 3 days, whatever, a week. NRMP needs to be notified of those. Even if it's fine with you, it's fine with the applicant, you guys work it out, everybody approves it, NRMP still has to be notified. Confidentiality, this is another really, really big one. You guys are all in one room. OSU, we talk about we're a big family. We're closely tied to the medical school. This is a really messy one, really important. Programs have a right, flip side, applicants have a right. To keep information confidential. That's names and identities of applicants. That is information pertaining to preference signals, anything around offers, acceptance, outcomes of interviews, information pertaining to ranking preferences and so. Where this gets messy, I said it's really common for students to apply OB and family, right? That's where the big concern with the new application is. So I applied to OB, but I'm also applying back up to family. So my great OB program directors are going, man, we have this really great applicant, but we don't think they're gonna make the cut. Hey, we know they also applied to family medicine. Hey, family medicine people, this person is really great. We would love to take them, but we don't think that they're gonna make the cut. You are now sharing information about who applied to your program, where they might be on the rank list with the family medicine program. That's a violation of that student's right to have their information kept confidential. They may not want the family medicine program to know. Converse, they may not want family medicine program directors telling OB that they're applying to family medicine as background. So there's a lot of things around that. So it's important to keep that information close to the chest. Things that you can do, and there's another pointed question. When I sent the slides to Dr. Song, she got a little nervous that I even put this on there. So I will tell you, be very, very careful. You can't say, hey, Dr. Duncan, I think you're going to be a great pediatrician and we think you would do well in your program. What you cannot do is say, I'm going to rank you and you're going to be on number 1 on my rank list and engage in a verbal or a written contract outside the match. But we can't tell people you really fit into the culture of our program. We think you do great here. Same thing, applicants can tell you that too. I love it here. I think you're the greatest thing ever. I will tell you, I caution students all the time, program directors lie to you. They will lie to your face about how awesome they think you are. Don't trust anyone, so be really careful about that. The thing is, though, from a program director standpoint, for protecting yourself in your program, be aware if you tell a student, hey, we really think you fit into the culture here, and we think you do really great as a resident here, that student is hearing. They just offered me a place, I'm gonna get there no matter what. So their interpretation of what your words, even if they are very, very careful, is gonna be different than the words that are chosen. They're gonna hear what they want to hear. So my best advice is avoid this at all costs. Where people get in trouble is program directors are great at this. Coordinators are great about this. Faculty are great about this. Residents are horrible because the residents are gonna be whispering amongst themselves. And remember that those residents represent your program. So if the residents say, hey, don't worry, you are our number 1 person on our rank list, they just spoke for your program and you have a match violation. So really important, the residents have got to understand that they cannot do that kind of stuff. Again, it's a big culture shift because in my day, the residents were the ones who were going behind the scenes, making all the magic happen, right? They were the ones that were kind of making sure that everybody knew where everything was. So be really careful. The other thing is you cannot, under any circumstance, ask students where else they're interviewing, what other specialties they applied for. And this happens really casually, right? Do you plan to stay in the state of Oklahoma? Well, we just asked them about geographic preferencing. Are you only applying to orthopedic surgery, or are you going to apply, or are you thinking you may have some backups? So it happens usually in a good nature and kind of casual way, but again, it's a match violation. You can't persuade. Where this happens is you ask applicants about geographic things or specialties of interest or other things. That's considered persuasion and attempting to influence them. So during an interview with an OBGYN program, Ms. Nancy Wheeler was asked by the program director while she paid the interview. She was asked to send a note to the chief resident, letting her know their level of interest in the program after they finished their interviews. I will tell you all these things have actually been reported as not violations, so I didn't make these up. What's the issues? Programs cannot engage in coercive tactics. That means asking can be considered pressuring someone to reveal information about where they're applying or where they're interviewing or where they like to interview or where they might interview or where they have family or why they want to be in an area. So students will disclose all of this information if you just listen. Just don't ask. is a big thing. They're gonna tell you all kinds of things, right? Students disclose crazy amounts of information that they should not. I'm like, I want to be an OBGYN because I had an abnormal past year when I was 12 years old. It had inspired me that it's really important to be sensitive, and you're sitting there going, oh. Thanks for sharing. Students tell you lots of information because they get nervous. So you just listen, but it's really important on your side to not ask those questions. Everybody's shaking their head because they know I'm right on this. The other big thing that we see is offering an applicant who is matched in a concurrent year, so in the same year, a position in another program. So again, this is a huge risk for you all. This is one of the challenges of being too close between all of us. So a GI program at Hopkins General posted a first-year fellowship, brand new program, right? We just got approval from ACGME. We're so excited we want to take a GI fellow. Well, the program director interviewed and offered a position to Mike. He was an applicant who had already matched into an endocrine program, but he matched into the endocrine program before we had approval for the GI program, and we knew we really wanted to do GI, so we're going to tell him there's a problem there, right? He's a matched applicant in another program. So the match participation agreement requires the program use the applicant match history to know if they're eligible before they talk to them. The other thing that really needs to happen is he has to be released. So here's the thing. So I matched to family medicine. I soaked into family medicine, but I found out that there's an ER position that's open, and I didn't know there was an ER admission or post-match, but I soaked in, which is still an agreement, to another program, and there's a CR position, and I really would rather be an ER doc. And so the ER person says, man, we'd really like to take you, and we don't get a release. That's an issue. You can't have it both ways. You can't shop for another position if you have a signed contract over here. You have to get released from the signed contract before you can shop for the new position. Really, really important. These are just easy things that happen because everybody's trying to do the right thing and get the right person to the right place, but they're match violations. So I said this before, all institutional staff who participate in interviews, decision-making, or speak for the program have to be aware of these policies. Be careful of your residents. It's a binding commitment, right? The second you match to a program, that is the same as you signing 37 pages for a mortgage. You have agreed, it's a contractual obligation. So you have an obligation to be there. Any program who encourages an applicant with a match or sort of commitment to seek a position in another program without a waiver has violated the match participation agreement. That means if you're trying to ship off someone, and we got this person through SOAP, but we really think they do better over there. You violated the program over there who wants that person, has violated, everyone has violated the match participation agreement, including the student. You have to begin training an applicant on the start date specified in the employment contract with the intent to complete. This is the other thing, right? So I told you the match participation agreement governed 45 days, but I can't have you start in the program and say, oh, we're just going to get through August 14th and then we'll let you go. If you actually have them start, your intent has to be in the best interest of that resident. That doesn't mean that residents don't get let go for lots of different reasons, but you shouldn't take someone in if your intent is to just get through that first 45 days or 1 year and then let them go. So waiver process, there's two options that can happen. So we talked about lots of reasons why you may want a waiver. So two things can happen. You can request a waiver, which is release for the match participants for the binding commitment, or you can request a deferral. So maybe it's that resident to who you really, really wanted, that something happened, they had a baby, something joyous to make it a good thing, and so they didn't actually finish their clinical rotations until July 15th. They were supposed to start with you July 1st, so it's going to completely mess up your schedule, undue hardship to your program, and so you can actually defer for a year. Deferrals almost always get accepted. Just so you know, unless there's a reason not to accept a deferral, they must always go through the questions asked. Or you can ask for a waiver, and a waiver would release you both from that match commitment. NRMP, it has the sole discretion of granting or denying requests for waivers. If you're going to request a waiver, you need to demonstrate either that you had circumstances demonstrating unanticipated serious extreme hardship that can be on the side of the program or the student, or the applicant is ineligible to begin training. So most of the waivers that we see get granted are usually because someone can't begin training when they're supposed to begin training. So they had a delay in their graduation from medical school. So three big things. We want to make sure that we release matched applicants from binding commitments before we shop to fill that position. We need to make sure that we don't discuss, support, or encourage matched applicants, candidacies, and other programs. And we don't want to fill a position with another applicant if they cannot or will not honor their commitments. So we have to actually have that release, that waiver from NRMP before we fill our position. So even if you know, you think it's going to happen, you still have to wait. So internal medicine program at Hopkins General was contacted after the match by Jonathan Myers. Matched applicant, he couldn't join the program due to financial hardship. The internal medicine program says no problem, we'll release you from your binding commitment. What's the issue? The program can't issue that release. That release comes from NRMP. So you request a waiver from NRMP of the match agreement and it is trainer. So both of you, that request can come from either the program or from the student. And we'll talk about what happens in just a minute. So don't encourage people to go somewhere else, right? Rather than match to dermatology. I love this one. This is again, it actually happened. Match to dermatology program at American Hospital during the main residency match. After the match completed, she informed the match program of an open ER position near her hometown. She explained that ER was really her preferred specialty, and the dermatology program agreed to speak to the emergency medicine program about taking her. I don't know anybody who goes from derm to ER. The issue, the match participation agreement for this program is from discussing match applicants candidacy with another program until the waiver is granted. She would have to be released from her contract in the waiver granted before you could help her get into another program. After the match results released, cardiology fellowship program at Hopkins General learned that Max Mayfield would complete her 4 IM training on program on time to begin fellowship. Program offered Dr. Mayfield's position for that match applicant on the program's right list. They didn't get a waiver first. So you've got to get the waiver before you can interview, discuss, whisper that you have an open position. So make sure that you go through the process. Remember that goes through 45 days. So say Max showed up for training, was there for 3 days and said, I can't handle the stress, I was completely wrong, I quit. You still have to get a waiver from NRMP to be able to fill that position. She can stop showing up to work completely. You still have to get the waiver before you can fill the position. It doesn't mean you have to continue to employ her, but you have to get a waiver before you can fill the position. So waiver investigations, they're going to contact you and seek information from everyone involved to find out if it meets conditions for a waiver. So if you as a program request a waiver, they're going to contact the candidate and say, do you agree, not agree? Super easy when both parties agree, right? We need a waiver, I need a waiver, no problem, not a problem. The burden's on the applicants and the programs to present the facts. If a waiver is granted, the program can recruit another candidate for the vacant position, the applicant can go to another program, everybody's released, no harm, no foul. If it is not granted, the program and the applicant are expected to fulfill the contractual obligation. Failure to sue will result in a violation investigation. So now instead of a waiver, we actually have a match policy violation. The applicant of the program can request reconsideration of waivers if they're dissatisfied with the outcomes. This actually can drag on for a period of time, so it's important to kind of know that. Match policy violations, programs, medical schools, and applicants should be ethical, professional, responsible throughout the application, interview, and match process. Known or suspected violations of the match policy violation by a match or sub-participant must be reported to NRMP. So there's actually in your match participation agreement an affirmative statement that if you know a match policy violation, you have to report it to NRMP for investigation. Common things where we see violations fail to provide complete, timely, accurate information. So I talked to you about that. This really comes down to policies and contracts. Make sure that information is available. I really encourage you to have them sign something that says that they saw and that they know it's available and they can read it. But they at least are affirming that they had access to it. The other huge one is asking applicants to reveal names, specialties, geographic locations, and other identifying information about programs they're applying to. The contract can come here. Sorry. The third issue is offer positions and applicant who's matched to a concurrent position in another program. So what happens if you have a violation? NRMP violation contains really, really detailed information for programs found to be in violation. But the big thing you need to know is what happens. And this can happen for programs, this could actually happen for institutions. If NRMP found that multiple programs were having match violations, they can kick the whole sponsoring institution out of match. That has happened. So, what can happen? You get identified as a match violator in the R3 system. That usually doesn't happen for programs. Usually that is for applicants. They'll get flagged for 1 to 3 years, or they can be permanently banned from participating in the match. What we see a lot for programs is that you get banned for participating in NRMP matches for 1 to 3 years. So you're not just a violator, but you actually can't participate. So programs that are found to be in violation, if it rises to the right level, can actually be barred from participating in a match. And what that means is any person who then enrolls in a match, you cannot talk, interview, do anything with them until the match is completely finished. Now, if you happen to have a pool of candidates who never registered for the match, that were existing completely outside of that system, you could in theory interview them. But everyone would have to be completely outside and not participating in any way. The other thing that usually happens is your review committee at ACG&E gets notified of the violation of the match, because usually by the time you risen to this level, there are core program requirement violations that have occurred, because we're usually in the ethics domain of pretty egregious things. Whether they be discriminatory practices or things along those lines, but it's going to get reported to ACG also. So really important. The other thing that usually happens is the GMAC gets notified, your institutional officer gets notified, so everybody gets told. Usually the other things that go in there is that your GMAC is going to have to document faculty development for the program related to their match violations. And so you'll have to go through an affirmative process of actually documenting that every single person understands from a compliance standpoint. So there's a lot of kind of headache things, I guess, would be the easiest way to say it, that usually go into what is addressed as a match violation. So with that, I will stop. And there's all kinds of references on here for you guys. And I put them there specifically because it'll get you to a lot of the policies that may be helpful for you if you have direct policy questions. Do you guys have questions? That was a whole bunch of information, I know. Yes.
We just kind of alluded to positive information being something of the rug and negative being highlighted. Communication with other programs about applicants. The only applicable area I see for me is like couples matching and checking with other program status of the other couples.
Technically, you can't.
Okay.
Now, this gets into kind of those gray areas. You know, if you were in a doctor's dining room and said, you're going to violate their privacy. I can't come up with a scenario where you'd be like, man, I interviewed Natasha and I thought she was great. I know her husband's applying to orthopedic surgery and the orthopedic surgery resident supervisor director happens to be at the next table. And never hear that. And that's still technical because we violated the privacy of that person, that applicant who's applying. Now, someone would have to hear that and report it, but I told you that you all, as participations in the match, have an affirmative action that if you see match violations, you're supposed to report them. So that goes to that professionalism and self-regulation and ethics. It's really hard, isn't it? Yeah.
Something that we can bring up in the interview because it is in their application that they are couples matching.
Yeah.
Is that a fair question to bring up?
So if they're couples matching, you get into kind of the HR thing. So I would run this by your guys' HR to make sure that they're okay with it. So these they put in their applications themselves are open for discussion. That's why I get crazy when students disclose personal things in their applications because they remove them from a not asked question to an asked question. The second they come in and go, man, I'm sorry I was late for my interviews because I have 6 kids and I had to get them to daycare. Now all of a sudden that becomes fair, whereas before you can ask that stuff. So if it's in there, usually what happens in reality is the student themselves bring it up. I'm participating in a couples match and my person is applying to X. And then you can ask some questions around that. But I don't know that I would bring it forward because what they're gonna come back and complain of is that you discriminated against them because they were participating. It's almost a no-win, if that makes sense. I gotta go to Ashton on her back.
One of the areas of we actually did have, I don't remember the entire scenario now, but a PGY2 position because we had increased our complement. And we thought that we could offer that spot outside the match, being a PGY2 spot that we had gained with accreditation since we had registered for the match. But in policy, there were some dates, and I think it's February 1st, but you mentioned earlier that it doesn't apply to PGY2, so I was just looking for clarity.
So it depends what that person is doing. So if that person is going through the match, so say they were they did a PGY1 general surgery, and they want to come in as a PGY2 family medicine resident, and you're having to evaluate whether or not they meet the dental rotations to qualify as a PGY2. They're not going to actually come straight across. They probably are going to have, and they have enrolled and applied to go through the match. If they've applied to go into the match, you can't interview and take them as a PGY2. If they're a PGY1 family medicine resident in Florida, and they need to come to Oklahoma, and you have an open PGY2 spot, and they notify you and it's the same specialty, then and they have not enrolled in the match, and they call you and say, do you have any open PGY2 spots? You could take that person as a PGY2. Does that make sense? That person that I think was specialty changing, which means they would have to be evaluated to make a determination of whether or not that they meet the qualifications actually to be a PGY2. And I think that they had already enrolled and participated in the match.
Yeah, and I mean, just from what I was reading, the part that's still a little confusing to me is that it says if that spot exists before the quota change date, then you cannot offer it.
Right. So did you guys hear that? So if we get notified by the family medicine RC, that we got approval of our quota, and it's prior to January 31st this year, I think, which is the quota change date. We can't fill that position outside of the match. It would be governed by the all-in policy. So we would have to put it into the match. It doesn't mean you have to fill that position. It means you can't fill it until after completion of SOAP. So you can still set on it. So where this normally happens, so it's January 31st, 2024. What normally would happen in this, and when you get into these nuanced things, email NRMP and ask them. Because they'll tell you, yes, you can or no, you can't. There's a whole department that their whole job is to make sure that you comply with the rules of the match. What normally happens are those December and early January RRC meetings, where they'll grant a complement, because remember, complement change does not mean that it's not designated to a PGY year. It's not like ACG came back and said you have a PGY2 spot. They came back and said you have they increased your complement by 3, which means you went from 12 residents to 15 residents, and you internally are making a mental decision how to allocate those across the years. And that's the reason why the all-in policy is written the way that it is to make sure that people have equal access and opportunity to that. Now you probably are making the decision, I don't want to take 3 extra PGY1s and have 6 PGY1s and have out balance my program. But you can fill that PGY2 position each way. That makes sense?
Yeah, that was the key, and I kind of sorted through it at the time, but I was just looking for that additional confirmation. It can be a little confusing.
It's super confusing.
With our PGY2 spot, which just held until after the match, and now we know that, but just making sure that PGY2
Yeah, so now, because in theory, you have a PGY3 spot too, right? So in theory, someone could say, hey, I want that open position in your program, and as long as you have funding, you could do that, but you just have to evaluate what that looks like.
So the questions that we can't ask, so it's not just for you,
That's any rotation. So as a rule of thumb, what I tell students, and I would counsel you in the same way, any sub-I, any clinical rotations, any of those are extended job interviews. So students absolutely can complain. Now, In reality, the match participation agreement does not govern students until they register to participate in the match. So it would not be a violation from an interview standpoint. However, if you ask a third-year student any of the forbidden questions, I promise you at some point you were going to get a complaint for discrimination to ACGME and to someone else, even though they're outside of the match. They're technically not governed yet. So the day that they match registration opens on September 15th, everyone comes into that participation. The other thing that programs will sometimes do is say, well, we're not going to register to participate in the match. We'll wait, because technically we have till January 31st to sign up. So we're not going to be governed by the match participation agreement until we actually formally register with the match. The problem with that is again, someone's going to make an ethical complaint because you are still engaged in the interview process, you're scheduling interviews, and then you're ultimately registering. So it doesn't really work. But that's been tried to do. Other questions, yes?
So this is more on the ERAS rather than NRMP, but I've noticed that last year and probably the year before, they started screening certain parts of the application where you can still view it, so like the picture, misdemeanors, felonies. Are there any changes coming down the pipeline that are they bringing up those discriminatory?
So I can't talk to ERAS's policies. You're outside. The reason that was done is because of concern around discriminatory practices. So really hard, right? And this is where things like why I'm a fan of training licenses. Is because when you have someone who they know they have to apply for a training license, they don't disclose prior felony arrests, they can't get a training license. That is an absolute reason they can't start training on time. That is an absolute reason for you to get a waiver and be able to fill that position with somebody else, right? And that's important because you don't have an open position setting in your program. The flip side to that is they come into your program, you don't have a training license, they're not required to disclose that, your background check doesn't pick it up because of the way background checks are done. And this is a prior lived experience. It was painful. So our background check doesn't pick it up. They have matched into your residency program, a 5-year residency program, a sealed juvenile record for a felony conviction. They can't get a license. The point that they couldn't get a license, we were able to get a release at that point. But if we had not done that, they made it through our HR background check. They would have come into the program. Now you've trained them for a year. They applied for their full license. They can't get a license. Now what do you do with that person that you've got a contract with? That's a big HR nightmare. So again, that goes back to some of the reasons why I'm a fan of our pulling into the licensing process early, is that you can pick up things that you might not, and save you some HR paperwork. And also, I think it's in the resident's best interest because I think it begins to transition from the concept of being a student to being a professional responsible for your own professional success. Shauna, did you have something to tell?
Most of the programs like mine not participate in the match. Does that mean that I have to ask the applicants and interviews if they participate in the match before?
Yep. And the program can actually help you with that. Yes.
Dr. Bray, I think your presentation said something about as far as, is it only residents that participate in the interview process, or is it any resident in the program?
Yes, so technically it's residents who participate in the interview process. However, what will happen from a complaint standpoint is a student's going to file a complaint saying a resident told me that I was going to be blanked. And it's going to be incumbent on you to prove that that resident was in no way involved in interviews, tours, get to know the residents, any aspect that could be tied to your recruitment into the program. Does that make sense? And so it becomes, the burden shifts to you to prove that that person was completely separated from any recruitment interview activities and therefore is not a violation of the part of the program. So as a general rule, I would tell your residents, this is a no-no, just because it saves you headaches. And I would probably tell the applicants, if the residents talk to you about the program's perception, understand that they're not speaking on behalf of the program. That's the other kind of affirmative thing that you can do is make sure that people who are applying to your program know that those residents do not speak on behalf of the program. I'm gonna protect you. I mean, right now, normally my job is to protect the students. Right now, my job is to protect you all and reduce as many headaches as possible, because this is a stressful time. Building your program is stressful, making sure you get the right people is stressful. Yes.
You mentioned, obviously referring to your policies, program and sponsoring policies, that if you have something in that policy that says we will not accept you if you have marijuana or whatever. So if you're talking about fellowship, could you put something in your policy that says failure to pass certifying boards is eligibility? Because my question is, those usually come back after August 14th.
Right. So you can't create a policy that the timing wouldn't work. In theory, yes, right? So family medicine is a great one. Family medicine takes their boards before they finish residency, but they're still applying for like their sports medicine fellowship prior to having board scores back. So it would be a fairly hard policy to defend. And then you put a policy and say, okay, internal medicine has to pass their boards before they matriculate to the PGY 6 year, third year of their cardiology fellowship, or they don't advance. Well, then, how did you support them? It almost becomes an affirmative burden on you as a cardiology fellowship to ensure that they do that, because otherwise you've got them working all the time and they've got the boards to your fault. So that's not necessarily an NRMP thing, that would be more of an ACGB program requirement and probably a violation. Anything else? I know you guys have a lot of busy stuff. You actually can read my name. If you guys have questions, email me. I'm happy to answer anything I can. And if I can't answer it, I'll get you to the right person at NRMP so they actually can answer your question. Because there's always the one-off nuanced things that are going to come up with each of your big programs. Like I said, my biggest concern is we tend to kind of be a fairly close-knit family. So the confidentiality around who we've interviewed, around who's on our match list, I'm going to be really careful about sharing that information. All right, guys, have a great day. Thanks for looking. Come see you.